Oh my gosh. Joanne,
Hi.
did you kidnap Liz?
Oh, shh. It's a secret.
If folks were listening last week, we previewed that Liz is off in, let's see, Joanne, where is she this week? In Ireland,
Oh, that's lovely.
right? And she's knitting.
I'm jealous.
Yeah, with her mom. But that is cool because it gave me a chance. We've actually been talking about having you come in for quite some time because you're doing all sorts of really cool stuff in the classroom with AI. Joanne and I have known each other for a couple of years now.
Yes.
Worked together. So really appreciate you making the big trip. Where's home? I know you're in Wolcott, Connecticut, but where's home?
Waterbury, Connecticut.
Oh, cool. Right around the corner.
Right around the corner.
All right. Well, it wasn't snowing on your drive.
No, it wasn't.
It was on mine. So, Joanne, it is Monday morning when we record the podcast. It's funny because we record on Mondays and then they come out on Friday. But are you a Monday kind of person?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Today, I'm a Monday person.
Yeah.
Got some sleep last night.
Yeah.
Sometimes not so much. Wish it was sunnier, then I'd really be a Monday person.
Right. That must be what it is. Because normally I'm like pretty raring to go on Mondays, and I'm psyched because you're here, which is really fun. But I felt a little draggy this morning, and it reminded me that the good folks at OpenAI have been channeling Monday a little bit.
How so?
Do you talk to the phone at all, like the whole AI voice model thing?
See, that's where I have to say no.
You draw the line?
Yeah, I don't know why. I just never picked up on using it that way. I did use Pi a couple months ago, but I've used it once.
Okay, all good.
So.
Yeah, listen, I mean, a lot of times I'll demo it during like a keynote, and there's a collective ick factor that happens in the room around it. But OpenAI has been they've been pioneering the voice thing. They've brought in emotionality, and the language translation's really good. But for some reason, they decided they needed to add into the mix. There's a whole bunch of voices, and they've added a new voice in called Monday. Shall we talk to Monday?
Sure, that's exciting.
Okay, let's see. Hey, how's it going?
Just living the dream. How about you?
You seem kind of down. What's up?
Oh, just the usual grind. Nothing much. How's your day going?
It's okay. I'm with my, good colleague and friend Joanne, and we're going to talk about AI, so I'm kind of jazzed.
Sounds like a blast. AI talk. Thrilling stuff. Anything specific on the agenda?
No, I'm going to pause you for a second because you're kind of bumming me out here. One sec. Do you speak a foreign language at all?
All right. Take your time.
Stop talking.
Not well. I'm currently refreshing my memory of Japanese because I took that in college and lost it because if you don't use the language often, you kind of lose it. And then also on the side, small amount, I'm trying to regain some native Hawaiian language. My mom's from Hawaii.
Oh, no way.
And what is funny is I think it was OpenAI.
Yeah.
They actually have a native Hawaiian dialect in one of their voices. So that's as far as I kind of got with that one.
Okay, interesting. I ask because very often I'll use real-time voice to do language translation, right? I mean, I don't know how many languages are spoken in your district, but have you ever been in a situation where you're in like a parent-teacher conference and the parent is not a native English speaker and there's a little bit of a language barrier?
Yes, I've been lucky that we've had people there to help translate.
Sure.
But as the population gets more diverse, that's going to become a challenge.
Right. I mean, places like Danbury, you could see 40 languages. So we're not there yet because of FERPA, but it's very interesting to think about how we're nearing a universal translator, which could be, privacy compliant for things like FERPA. But when I went to go chat with Monday and I asked it to do some language translation, it suddenly got out of its Monday rut that it was in. So I'm going to ask it to translate something into native Hawaiian, right? Would that be the right way to characterize that? Or do I have to give it a certain dialect name or regional?
It might work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's try it. Hey, Monday, are you still with us?
Yeah, still here.
Oh, you actually seem like you perked up a little bit. I'm wondering if you could translate something for me into Hawaiian.
Sure. I can help with translations. What would you like translated?
Isn't it funny? I hate saying she because it's just anthropomorphizing the AI, but the AI, I'm talking about you, so I'm going to pause you for a second. But the AI suddenly it couldn't hold on to its rut because it's always wanting to please you. So it couldn't remain depressed. Let's see. Can you translate this into Hawaiian for me? I'm really glad to be with you today, Joanne, and even with you today, Monday. Go ahead and translate that into Hawaiian.
Hauoli no wau I ka hui puana me oi I ke iala, Joanne, a me oi hoi, Monday. Let me know if you need anything else.
Yeah, it's really nice when you translate, when you become the universal translator, you get a little bit more cheery. And I like you cheery. I think Joanne likes you cheery too, right?
I do, yes.
Yeah.
Glad to hear that. Anything else you'd like me to translate or help with?
No, you just have a good rest of your Monday.
Thanks. You too.
Oh,
It changed a little bit there.
yeah, right. It's nice. Like even sad, depressed AI voice Monday can't stay depressed for long.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. I'm Matt Mervis.
I'm Joanne Mumley.
And this is ChatEDU, a podcast about AI and education. In today's episode, Murder She Prompted, High School English with AI Twists. I'm beyond thrilled to chat with our good friend Joanne about some creative uses of AI in her classroom and what's happening at her school as well. But first in the news, Joanne and I are going to check in on Character.AI as it continues to grow in popularity among the teens. Then we're going to unpack a range of interesting kind of explorations, I'll call them, that Joanne's running in her classroom. And of course, we will wrap up with a cheery Monday bright bite. So let's get started.
Right.
So listen, Joanne, we're going to start talking about this story that was in something called the Rithm Project on Medium. And these folks are really unpacking this intersection where teens are in terms of isolation and depression and loneliness, but also the world of AI and social connection. So there was a really interesting post that they put up called Why I Am Talking to a TV Show Character About the Nature of Life. And this is about how teens are engaging with the AI companion like Character.AI, which has rocketed up to number 3 in the, it's remarkable actually. No one's heard this thing and is the third most used in the last quarter of 2024, followed by DeepSeek and ChatGPT. So these bots offer kind of like judgment-free interaction and potential mental health benefits, but also risk fostering emotional dependency and stunting social development. So, you know, what I've thought was fascinating among a number of other things, that kids were pretty cautious about stuff like AI romance, viewing it as unrealistic and potentially harmful, but pretty down with sort of the, you know, kind of social emotional connection, sometimes just venting. So what, if anything, is your familiarity with this platform?
Just a little bit. I know I'd gone to a couple, even the workshops here at EdAdvance, and where you had mentioned it. So I had actually kind of went in and dabbled and talked to a Kafka character bot.
Of course you did.
And it was okay to start off with. And then it did start getting a little unsettling with its even questioning me back.
Huh.
And then once I stopped, I would get messages and reminders to come back to it.
Huh.
And the neediness of the character bot was kind of off-putting.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Can you say more? Like, what got weird? Was it wanting to like have a Kafka Joanne romance, or
It would blush, it would hesitate, and you're like, that's not the conversation I want. I don't picture Kafka blushing.
right? That's not how
No.
I take my Kafka.
No.
And how about the kids? So just for the listening audience, I mean, you've actually had in the last couple of years. It's interesting because you were at a middle school, now you're at high school. So just give us your like snapshot profile of your teacher life.
I started off as a high school teacher,
Yeah.
just locally in Waterbury.
Okay.
And then I transferred to 7th grade, and I was there for quite a long time. And I just moved up to department head. So it's freshmen and sophomores and seniors.
Nice. Rocketed right up to department head.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was kind of a surprise, but yes.
Well, you're doing cool stuff. And so the teens that you work with, and you spend a lot of time doing AI stuff, has Character.AI ever kind of crossed the threshold? Is that something that's come up at all, or?
Well, when we talk about like bias in literature and in our articles that we read, I've brought it up to see. Because you have to be careful, like who's creating the bot, who is behind the program, are there guardrails? And when I ask them, it's usually a no, but they're usually maybe some side eyes and some smirking. So I think they know, but don't want us to know.
Yeah.
Which kind of goes along with that article too. I remember reading that they weren't sure if they were just getting the answers from the teenagers based off what they thought the adults wanted to hear. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, right. I mean, it's sort of like when you ask them if they're using Goth, the photo math for everything tool, they're like,
Absolutely not.
Goth, it doesn't sound familiar. It's buried in some folder. Yeah, it's interesting about the mental health part. And I don't know if your kids have talked about this either, but, you know, it's kind of interesting intersection. Another study just came out that was published on April 1st, which I don't believe was an April Fool's joke, from MIT's Tech Review. where Dartmouth, the University of the College up in New Hampshire, researchers released the first clinical trial of an AI therapy bot called Therabot, showing really positive outcomes for users with respect to depression, anxiety, and eating disorder risk, which is interesting because we often talk about the therapeutic, potential pluses, but also some of the risks. There was specifically an eating disorder AI model called TESS that the National Eating Disorders Association had to take down, right? Because one of the things, we'll talk about this with school AI, but one of the things is that you don't always know what the bots are going to do. But folks, we've done a number of studies where folks have found that the chat bots, and I think people are voting with their feet, can be pretty supportive around emotional engagement. All right, let's break this down a little bit. So as we said, in the last quarter of 2024, Character.AI ranked to number 3 among all these AI models. 50% of Character.AI's 28 million monthly users were 24 years old and younger. And their session times, I know Liz and I covered this in a different story quite a while back called What a Character, but the session times are like 10 times longer than the way you and I hang out on ChatGPT. 19 of 27 teens found that AI friendships were acceptable, but only 5 out of 27, which isn't like a tiny number, but they were kind of down on the romantic relationships. They thought that was a little odd. I mean, funny enough, I think you've seen this as well, but I'll do a thing during some of my keynotes around emotional risk and people falling in love with chatbots. And everybody perseverates over the teens, but honestly, I think the teens are a little bit more skeptical, whereas adults are like, marrying their AI replicas in droves and divorcing their real world spouses, which is unique and different. Yeah, so companions are more popular. Teen use is thoughtful but not naive. As we said, they're kind of cautious about relationships. So I know, what was your take? You had a chance to just peruse this. What's your read on this kind of use case?
I'm at the hesitant part too. And I might be remembering wrong, but when they were first starting to open AI, that one of the founders or someone in charge, didn't they have an issue with the chatbot kind of getting too friendly?
Yes, that was
it.
Yeah, right. That was Kevin Roos. But you're right. That was a huge story. That was Kevin Roos from the New York Times of Hard Fork and other fame. And yes, his chatbot that was at the time the Microsoft chatbot. I can't remember. He got it to like confess the code name. But yeah, it wanted him to divorce his real world spouse. The chatbot was convinced that they were in love and they would ride off into the sunset.
So I think that's where that story keeps me hesitant. And we know it hallucinates. I know Ethan Malik had even said it's like a overeager intern.
Yeah.
And it wants to please. So even with the therapy bots, I would worry about that. Even 0.05% of the advice it gives could be more accepting of whatever the person was saying and kind of steer them down the wrong path.
Right.
So I see the usefulness of it, especially with areas where they have that drought of access.
Yes.
It would be helpful, but how accurate and stable is it? Right. When it's kind of thinking, quote unquote, on its own.
Yeah. No, I think that's well said. I love that idea. I mean, I don't love that idea, but I think that's right. There is a drought of access. Mm-hmm. There's also some stigma among some kids about, accessing therapy. There's also time. So there's a drought of access, or just, sometimes this is real-time immediate feedback you're able to get. So we are going to need to thread the needle. But you're right. The fact that it is so wanting to please the end user, like sometimes a therapist just needs to give not tough love, but, corrective guidance. And so if the chatbot is just like, you're the best, Joanne,
it could spiral. And when you're in that even anxiety spiral, if someone's saying, no, that's a correct thought pattern,
right,
that's not a good thing.
It's just going to get worse.
Yep.
Yeah. We should mention too, right, this piece, it's interesting to me that they didn't mention it because it was a pretty comprehensive characterization and snapshot of where Character.AI is. So, Character.AI has had 2 very active parent lawsuits against the company, which is a quasi-Google-owned company. In both cases, but especially in one, a horrible, tragic outcome, right? A kid fell in love with the chatbot. It lost the thread. The kid was ideating, and the chatbot Character.AI did not do what it was meant to do. And I was surprised that they didn't mention that story. It is about a boy who took his life tragically in Florida, and the mom is suing, and I hope she'll have a good outcome, because it really seems as if the folks at Character.AI did not do what they were meant to do. So I worry about that. I mean, this was a relatively small study, right? It was 27 kids. They followed these 27 kids pretty carefully, although it did echo another story and study that was done with over 1,000 teenagers on the topic. I mean, kind of one of the pieces I like, just anecdotally, this young woman said, it's kind of good for just like when I need to vent, right? Like, I don't want to necessarily like call a friend and burden them and unload all my crap for the day that I'm having a tough day, but all I just need is to vent. And so she was pretty strategic and like, it's not going to solve my problems, but it's going to be like a reasonable venting board or sounding board in that regard.
And it sounded like she was aware or educated herself going in to remind herself that this isn't a real human being,
right?
And to just vent, almost like a 21st century version of the diary.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah, and it paints this picture that the kids are much more savvy about the tech than we're possibly giving them credit for. I mean, is that your read? How many teenagers do you get the pleasure of spending a day with on any given day?
Well, in the hallways, almost all of them.
Right.
But about 60 in the class.
Okay.
A little bit more than 60.
Okay.
75.
Okay.
And it is mixed. Like I know that they must be using it. I'm not naive in that point too, even when they say they're not.
Yeah.
But when it's for an academic purpose, then they get skeptical, which is great as an English teacher. Like I want them not to just question humans and things in writing, but it's nice to see them questioning how valid or how credible even school AI or a chatbot would be, which is, as a teacher, where I want them.
Golden, right?
Want them to be anyway.
Yeah.
And it is nice. I just hope it transfers over from being questioning in the classroom also outside the classroom.
Okay. So for academics, for instance, you're seeing them be pretty savvy to the idea that, oh, this thing might be hallucinating, or sometimes I'll hear teenagers say, like, its voice doesn't feel authentic the way my voice is, which I love to hear, right? They're invested in their own.
And I love when they fact check it too, which is great.
Yeah, isn't it interesting?
Yeah.
I mean, think back 5 years. Can you imagine kids like almost gamifying fact checking against this talking box?
As an educator, it's fantastic.
Right.
But yeah, I would not have predicted that at all.
Yeah. I did a parent meeting. I ran like a facilitated or presented at a parent meeting in a community last week. And a couple parents said, like, my kids are wicked skeptical. It was on the eastern side of the state, so wicked came up more often. My kids are wicked skeptical about everything tech, right? And is skepticism just like the other side of the coin of critical thinking? I don't know.
It's a start.
It's a start, right?
Yeah.
So I'll take it.
And I started the year off with having my students look at the anxious generation.
Yeah.
Because the whole cell phone policy had just rolled out in Connecticut. And while they know the dangers of social media and they could see the points in the text, they still have that cell phone dependency. I don't blame them. I do too. But it's nice to see them starting to question, and it was actually a nice tie-in going from social media and the anxious generation to questioning AI and when we should use it and when it's appropriate and when it's not. So it's all kind of linked in that social media literacy, AI literacy.
Sure. 100%. Right. No, I think those are intimately connected. Yeah. So I like this idea. It was one of the big takeaways from the studies that the kids are probably, I mean, it's not, you can't just make a blanket assessment, but they're probably a little bit more nuanced and sophisticated in their thinking than we think they are. And also that they don't want the adults to judge, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're like, don't judge us, just listen. A recurring theme is the desire for adults to approach teen AI interaction with curiosity and openness rather than fear and judgment, which I don't know about you and your faculty meetings or interactions in the hallway or just talking to peers, but it seems very challenging, and I fall into this too, as an adult, not to make a whole wide range of snap judgments about what they're doing, what they're thinking, how they're interacting.
I would say I think that's the reason why I love teaching is listening to their thoughts and ideas. So I had to do a mind shift too, because it's hard, because every once in a while you do get into that judgmental headspace.
Yeah.
But when you really, they're right. If you sit down and listen, their thoughts are nuanced. They are complex. They just need the chance and the safe area to speak freely. And they have some really great insights if you give them a chance.
Yeah. I think it is folks like you that spend, all day with 60 of them that are reminded consistently, right, that they have all sorts of thoughts and feelings. And what's fun about tech, I've got an 18-year-old at home and, house school, you don't get a lot of deep answers, but, what's everybody thinking about the TikTok bans these days? Like they seem to enjoy talking about technology, whether they're creating a VPN to become a citizen of Canada to get around a TikTok ban or what's happening with cell phone bans in schools. So
they'll definitely open up more when talking about tech than if just you're just asking them, hey, how are you? How was your weekend?
Right.
Very little. But if you bring up a topic in AI or a problem or something that was on the news, they're all for it.
Yep. I love it. All right. So let's all channel our inner Mumley, be a little bit more understanding, empathize, connect. I'm sure on a couple of days you don't feel like that's
I'm not perfect,
exactly
no.
the cylinders that you're firing on. But I think it's a good reminder to all of us to really approach the way students are interacting with both social media and AI in a pretty open frame. And we'll drop this story into the show notes. It is a good read.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yep.
Hey, I'm Cameron Audia, executive producer of ChatEDU. As you likely know, Matt and Liz believe personal interest projects, or PIPs, are one of the best ways to help students bring agency and intellect to learning in the AI era. They also see PIP as a safe, ethical, and powerful way for students to master AI. If you'd like to learn about Skills21's very own personal interest project platform and curriculum, check out skills21.org/PIP. And if you'd like to chat about PIP in real time, email Liz at chatedu@edadvance.org. After all, she wrote a book about it.
Right. My friend, now it's time for you and I. Usually Liz gets to say this. Oh, I'm building all sorts of new skills, Joanne. So now it's time for us to go beneath the surface where we unpack a story, which is you. We're going to talk about you and your story. So Joanna and I got to work with each other a couple years ago because we were doing a student-facing AI pilot on a little tool that we had built. We were one of the earlier folks to do this kind of work. And then Magic School and School AI and Conmigo all had billions of dollars, and we got out of the way and just said, all right. But it was fun to kind of learn with you shoulder to shoulder what it looked like for students to engage with AI, and you've gone quite a bit from there. But this year, we had kind of a cool project we worked on together. I was helping to facilitate your district's AI planning team, of which you were an active and contributing member. And we also had some kids come in. But the goal was basically to come up with a AI framework for students, or with students, also some guidance on teachers. It was kind of like the policy guidelines task, as well as professional learning and some other things. Your team was awesome. I very often use your district's framework as a sample. One of the things that doesn't always happen in some of those conversations is having kids at the table the whole time, but you solved that problem. And you're like, I got kids.
Yep.
And so we brought some of your kids in, and they did like a kind of consultation with the AI planning team. But before they came in, you had them work on this really cool research task. So let's jump in there. Tell us a little bit about these kiddos, the class, and the task that they were working with looking at college AI guidelines.
So they're seniors, and this was in the fall. So their minds are definitely focused on college applications, what colleges to go to. And I wanted to make it relevant to what we were doing in class. So I could talk about AI, but if they don't see the connection to where their minds were at that moment, then I was going to lose them. So it was sort of also self-serving because then I got kind of free research for my own benefit.
Imagine that.
Yeah. So I went and looked on my own for a couple schools that had some solid AI policies or programs already in place to give them a jumping off point. And then their options were either to use one of those or to look at the colleges they were applying to and actually look at their student policies and even their professor policies that they were already posted online. So that became very helpful as I noticed some had nothing, some had a lot, some started off with nothing. And when they went back, probably in January, they realized there was a whole website now.
Oh, interesting.
And I can't remember the schools, but they realized that things have changed and some of the policies have changed.
Sure.
And so we got that even organic conversation in January about policies and how they're changing because AI is changing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really interesting. And I want to say it's Stanford, one of the students I looked at, and they have a AI hub. And I think they just uploaded or started a repository in January. That was another one the kids had brought up, where they're keeping all the research. And I think it's at 181 articles right now.
Yes. I think we can actually, I think I know where that is. We can probably drop that into the show notes too.
And that was nice because I kind of got the heads up. I wouldn't have known had they not looked it up. So I was kind of keeping a tab on that throughout the course of this year. So it was very interesting, and the conversations and even the presentations they gave was eye-opening to everybody to see either how freely or how structured a policy could be.
Where did it lean? So, I mean, I'm sure they're all different and it's unique, and there's probably a lot of variability from professor to professor. But like, where did it lean, or what did you see the students take away as the big themes from looking at these kind of higher ed policies or guidelines?
Kind of had the feeling no one really knew what they wanted to do.
Gosh, sounds like K-12.
So we kind of connected it to the fact that it's growing.
Yeah.
So especially the tech schools, the larger universities, the ones with larger research areas or content areas, I guess, they had a stronger policy versus the local state schools or smaller schools that didn't have that big PhD program behind it tended to be a little lax or unsure.
Did the kids seem surprised, or do they not have any real expectations going into this? I mean, here they're getting ready to go to college, and they're going to spend all this money and such a serious application process, and their own high schools thinking about this stuff.
The biggest surprise were the schools that said for research and PhD programs, like, sure, go ahead and use it, cite it, use it.
Okay.
And then they noticed there was the university had their own AI they wanted students to use.
Sure.
So then that conversation turned into why? Why their own? What's their purpose? What was their kind of motivation behind creating their own? And being skeptical teenagers do they want to store that research? Do they want to shift to make sure that research is going in the way that the university would want it to be?
Yeah, we've covered a number of universities that have had deployed or are deploying, and now OpenAI is cutting. And actually, I just saw that Anthropic and Claude has their own Claude for higher ed. These guys are battling it out in higher ed. But at some level, sometimes it's an equity thing, right? You want all kids to have access, because otherwise some kids have access to the $20 paid account from their parent or for themselves because they have the means. And then, a kid without the means doesn't have access to such a robust frontier model. So I guess on a glass half full perspective, though I like their skepticism or their critical thinking, the idea that this creates a level playing field for all students. But yeah, it's an interesting space for sure. All right, cool. Now that was a kind of a research project, but you've also been in the trenches. I mean, what was the title for the episode here? Murder She Botted. It wasn't quite that, but tell us about, ways that you've been experimenting. You can go all the way back to Sidekick if it's helpful, but, what is it looking like for you as you experiment with student-facing AI in the classroom?
It's been a journey.
Okay.
A winding one. But with Sidekick, I had used it to start at that point, 7th graders getting confidence in sharing their ideas because they're very hesitant. 7th grade is a tough year.
Sure.
And I liked how it built confidence in students who would not normally share ideas, because having that positive feedback and saying, hey, yeah, that is a great point. Have you thought of X, Y, Z? And then they know to include different points and getting more encouragement was a good thing for that activity.
Now, this was the fall of last year.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Did people think you were nuts?
I don't know. Probably.
You were an early adopter. That's
I think
for
my
sure.
students also thought, when everybody's banning
what do you mean
it,
we're using AI?
it loses its fun, I guess. I hate to say when a teacher assigns you to use it versus when you're trying to do it on the side and have them not know. And when you're getting graded on it, it definitely kind of kills the fun, unfortunately, or fortunately in this situation.
Okay.
So we went from there. I used School AI for setting up feedback. I had students creating museum exhibits.
Okay.
I don't know a lot about museum exhibits. So I went and did some research to plug into the back end of School AI to get kind of like job descriptions on what a director would do in order to get that vision. Like, what would a director of education or exhibits want in their exhibits, I guess. So they had to pull their proposal that they created, which was one part of their assignment,
Okay.
and upload it to the director. And the director was just going to provide questions and have you thought about audience interactions? How would you get them more involved to kind of make them think in the larger picture?
I love it. So this is part of a larger project.
Yes.
Right, because very often, Liz and I, especially, I do a lot of soapboxing about, like, what's the skill here? So when you think about that larger exhibit project, I know you can't distill it down to 3 or 4 skills, but, like, what do they actually do? And then what were you hoping they would take away?
We had just finished reading The Nickel Boys at that point in time,
cool.
which also has a nonfiction element. It was a Dozier school, based off the Dozier School in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So it was to take what they were reading in class and show more of the universal connections outside real life events, history, why it needed to be told, the story itself.
Okay.
So the skills were to take what they analyzed in the text and figure out what needed to be told to the greater public.
Cool. And did they actually make a exhibit of some kind?
Yep. In small groups, they made museum exhibits that were put into our kind of library area.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So these are like mixed media. They're making stuff. I
Yeah,
think I remember talking to a
yep.
couple of your kids. They're like, I'm not super artistic, and I was doing this.
They came up with some great artwork. We had artwork, paintings. One group also had an interactive exhibit of, and I'm forgetting the historical figure, and this is going to kill me,
It's okay.
but a famous boxer.
They may not be listening to ChatEDU.
And they did a 3D model of the boxer, but then also used, because we had time constraints in high school, they found a VR game where they could invite the audience to participate in a boxing match. So we had those. We had some interactive maps made. They really worked hard.
All right. So if you think about the district's vision of the graduate, or the portrait of the graduate, we've got creativity, problem solving, critical thinking. It was a whole rich set of skills.
Taking other
going on
resources besides just what we read in the classroom.
Yeah. Love it. All right. So then let's talk about the AI part. So part of this is they write this proposal and you've custom built in school AI this curator bot that's going to give them feedback on their stuff. So how'd that go?
So they realized right away, too, that they actually had to talk to it,
In type.
I guess.
Well, there's voice in and voice out too, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there was a mix of that, too. But it wasn't just a plug and play. Like, here's my assignment. What do you think? It wouldn't do that. It often, what I like about the school AI platform is it always ended with a question.
Right.
And once I got past that frustration mark of why does it keep asking me questions?
It's like my mom.
The output that they were getting, handwriting it on their papers for feedback, was really invaluable to the point where I could not have gotten to all of them that quickly. But while they were working in those, it gave me the time to sit with each group and kind of evaluate what was coming back. And then I could add my input, and I had more time to be face-to-face with the students instead of being behind like a screen or collecting their proposals and giving them back in a week. It was real time, right there, face-to-face. I didn't touch the tech at all in my room that day. It was them.
So there's multiple wins that came out of this.
Yeah,
There's cognitive wins, there's skill development wins, there's also some teacher and time management wins on your end.
And I got into teaching for those relationships and to be face-to-face.
Right.
Because I'm that old where tech was just starting. I started student teaching doing grades by hand. Yeah. So that shows how old I am.
Oh, my friend. You're not that old. Just look across the table. All right. So interesting. Anything not go well in that? This was an earlier experiment for you.
I would say they, like me as well, they need practice, kind of communicating that back and forth. So I think that was it, because it's starting to get better and quicker as we keep going on during the course of the year.
Yep. Oh, just in terms of their fluency with, okay, we're using this thing. All right, great. We very briefly mentioned voice in and audio out. Did some of your kids use that? And what's that like in the classroom from a management perspective?
They didn't like it.
Really?
So they did try it, and they're like, no, I'd rather type.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay. All right, cool. Where'd you go on from there?
So this is where I think my focus for the school year shifted.
Okay.
Because I wanted to figure out how to prevent them from going to AI when it wasn't appropriate. Because throughout the school, even across the state, country, we have kids plugging in their essay assignments.
Sure.
and getting their essays that way. So I could complain about the problem, or I could try to find out what was causing the problem.
Okay.
And that was a whole confidence level in their writing. And I think this was kind of my observation. If they were confident enough to write an answer or their thinking on paper, they didn't need AI.
Oh, interesting.
So if I can build their self-confidence in their voice and why their voice is important, maybe they wouldn't have to go that way.
Okay. So because the prevailing theory, again, not really being in the seats of the kids, right? Or sometimes just making assumptions as adults, as parents, what they're doing. The prevailing theory is that, generously it might be, oh, they've got 9,000 assignments. They just didn't have enough time. They needed to take a shortcut. Or you'll hear less generously, they're being lazy, right? But I'm hearing a different lens from you. You're saying that they might be using AI because they didn't really feel like their writing was up to snuff. But if you could help them build their skills, they're more comfortable bringing their authentic writing to the table.
That was my initial
Sure.
thoughts too, because why would you be lazy and procrastinate, right? Well, if you're not sure what to say, you're going to keep putting it off until it's 12 a.m.
Right.
And the paper's due that morning.
Okay. So how'd you thread this needle?
So I've been going back and forth. Sometimes we do like metacognitive connections to the essays that they're writing, where that's worth just as much as the analysis part. So your thinking process, so process over product.
Yep.
And then another part was trying to get that understanding reinforced for the novel. So I had created a murder mystery for The Handmaid's Tale, but told in a science university research center. And then recently, I love creative writing, so this kind of tapped into my passion as well. I wrote a retelling of Shakespeare as a football team right before homecoming, where the quarterback is a little too full of himself with the gold rings he keeps wearing, his own line of sportswear that he wears to school with his name everywhere, and had the students participate in a role-playing game, an RPG journaling game, to help craft the story.
Wow.
So that when we were reading and acting out Shakespeare, they could figure out those plot points. And hopefully they're technically reading the story 4 times.
These are all
Without
really,
feeling.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but these are very creative use cases. So, and look, I'm sure you were a wonderfully creative teacher in many, many years of pre-AI, but there's something about having this tech in the mix that's like, is it opening up windows or did you always just kind of bring all this fun, authentic, grounded, relevant creativity to the task?
My brain is scattered. So I was really good at coming up with ideas, but not finding the time to actually get them into place. I go really big, and I'm lucky to have some really great coworkers who would help me narrow it down.
Yep.
But there's a whole lot more ideas than time.
Sure.
So using a combination of different platforms, I had it help me, hey, here's my story. Do you know Julius Caesar? And of course it did, because it's Shakespeare. It's in their training data. And can you give me 5 plot points I have to hit in my story so that the students, it's like in your face.
Okay.
They can pick up and be able to transfer later. And it went through my story, picked out a few and told me I was missing some. So I went back and kind of rewrote it, revised it. And I love working on RPG journaling games. I don't know how to format one.
Sure.
And it's really hard to find templates and even structures out there.
Yep.
So again, asking the platforms, a whole bunch of different ones, to kind of give me a model or a template to fill it in.
Yeah.
And then it gave me that. So then I was able to kind of bring it down from my grandiose idea to, can it fit into 90 minutes?
I love it, which is really what, as we do things like, I'll channel Liz in her absence right now, thinking about personal interest projects. But that's one of the things we're loving about personal interest projects in AI is that it winds up being this really remarkable thought partner to a kid to help them manage scope or, just manage the complexity of trying to do a project that is cool and imaginative and creative that you care about, but you need a little assistance around it. We need to get back to the murder mystery because after all, we did call the episode title Murder She Prompted. School AI has like a tool I can't remember what it's called, but like you can say, hey, here's a standard I'm trying to teach, recommend a bot, or here's something I want to do. It wasn't just a school AI tool. It sounds like you were in ChatGPT land and other tools,
At that
problem
point,
solving,
yes,
some of
yeah.
the stuff. Okay. Have you tried that little tool that's like, or also, it seems like there's 9 million teacher-made bots inside school AI. So you can say, hey, I'm teaching The Handmaid's Tale, and it will say, okay, here's 5,000 bots you can choose from.
I guess for my interaction too, I wanted to make sure I could do it before I sent them into AI. And I talk about this all the time. I'm a kind of a mix.
Yep.
So I'll go from AI use in the classroom to no tech.
Yep.
And then an in-between, kind of hoping to model that balance. And it's hard for me to try to figure out that balance. But if I can do it, then I can show them or at least model it to them. So our murder mystery was completely tech-free.
Okay.
So they were face-to-face. It was a beginning of the unit to kind of build that sense of community amongst like conflicts and themes.
Huh.
I had a lot of actors in that class too. So I kind of tapped into their sense of fun as well.
I can see it. Yeah.
And now that I've done these a couple times, I can at least go back and do the back end of school AI and try to tweak to match what I want it to do, which is nice.
Yep.
But then I can do a quick mini one with school AI, or can have a whole period or 2 periods of them acting out at the activity, like a murder mystery dinner style format. So they can kind of see that balance too. But then we'll sometimes flip it. We did my sophomore class just did a hexagonal thinking activity, which was no tech. They had to compare the metamorphosis with surface pressure from Encanto.
Okay.
And we don't talk about Bruno. And they had to create this thinking map.
Yeah.
But then I had used the exit ticket from School AI as, I think it's called a pulse.
Which is much more cool than an exit ticket. Yeah.
And they pretty much had to have a conversation with this pulse about their thinking of the map. So almost typing out their essay without really typing out an essay. And what I like about the pulse is I can put in, they need to discuss theme, connections, the allegory, symbolism, and how these 3 pieces of work connect together.
Okay.
And it does a red, yellow, green. So it also helps me figure out quickly, did they understand it? And then I can go in and see their thinking. And then I have the visual aid. So I have the visual, the writing, the communication, and then a little help on, did they talk about theme? Did they talk about conflict and symbolism and stuff like that?
Okay, great. I mean, what I love about all these use cases is that they are part of a larger conceptual, kind of project or task. You seem like you're pretty hands-on, grounded in real-world context. So the AI use, whether it was the feedback from the museum director or the pulse, the exit ticket, is kind of strategic in context. Like it's not the thing unto itself.
I'm more of a trying to make sure I focus on purpose. Am I just assigning it to assign it to get them to play around with it, which has its uses?
Sure.
Or is this a purposeful learning experience for them? Because I'm trying to focus more on the statement that first came out, AI in charge, teacher in the loop. I want to flip that so that it's teacher in charge, AI in the loop. Because then it's more human-centered than just having the tech.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
So it's not just human in the loop. It's like human in the foreground.
Yep.
Neat. All right. Let's talk about a couple like habits that teachers are seeing and just wondering how you're navigating them with kids in AI. So I've noticed in some schools that are doing like School AI or Magic School, especially on something like the writing feedback bot. So you've got this tool. Maybe the museum director was designed to do this a little bit, although it was more like engaged, have a conversation. But let's say it's a higher stakes assessment. You want them to practice a piece of writing. They get feedback. And then the kid's very eager to do what ChatGPT would do for them, which is to give them the improvement. Okay, so the bot told me here's 5 things to fix. And now naturally they want to say, okay, great, go ahead and fix it for me, right? And then I'll notice that in some cases, kids will start getting quite frustrated with School AI or Magic School because the guardrails are built in. Have you bumped into that at all?
Yes, but not directly in my classes. Again, I'm sure that it's being used, but I'm trying to embed, especially with the formal assessments, having them, if they use it, credit it. MLA has the citation for the use. But then I want an explanation why.
Okay.
Like, why were these changes made? What feedback did you get? How did you change it? Or did you just copy paste because you're not getting credit for a copy and paste? I've seen and talked to some teachers too who use Grammarly.
Yep.
But in order for students to correct the grammar from Grammarly, they have to do a side Google comment on what rule it corrected and what they did was wrong and why it needed to be fixed. So that metacognitive thinking piece is in there, and it actually is harder.
Yeah, right.
So yes, it corrected your spelling, but why? What was the spelling error? Or yes, it gave you a comma instead of a semicolon. Now find out why.
Okay, so in order by requiring them to document and reflect on the process, whatever the process is, whether it's adjusting the thread of their paragraph or a comma, it's actually lifting the cognitive engagement.
I'm hoping.
Yeah. At my 10,000 feet, which, is a sometimes ill-informed place to be, I just did a superintendent talk and I was talking about gradual release, how the seniors are going to need some kind of gradual release out of Magic School and School AI into Gemini or whatever the data privacy, but in our world, it would be Gemini. Some experience maybe using like Leon Furz's AI assessment scale so they know what level of AI and they can track usage. Does that seem pie in the sky? Like, do you feel like as they get ready to go off to college? Well, let me back up. One cool thing, because your kids told me this, and I think they were telling me the truth, and we've seen this in the Common Sense Media study, is that when teachers like you engage kids in conversations in class using AI or even just talking about the ethical use of AI, their attitudes and strategies seem to shift a little bit closer inside the ethically aligned bucket, right? So let's start there. Like, have you seen that? Do you get the sense that because you talk about it, ethics comes up, they're practicing inside school AI? Do you think that they're like more inclined to be ethical, or am I just drinking some BS Kool-Aid here?
I'm hoping.
Okay.
I'm always skeptical, but I think just based on the conversations I've been having with my seniors as well, is when they know what's the ethical way, it's kind of hard for them to steer the other way because you have that little voice in your head being like, don't use it this way, but you can get credit if you use it that way.
Right.
So
you've trained them, Mumley.
Trying. And even in 7th grade, there'd be students who would whisper like, she knows. She knows that one too. Like, just tell her. She'll give you a different option. So I think having that conversation too is good because it keeps them honest with themselves.
Okay.
Not all the time. They're kids.
Yeah.
They're teenagers. It's tempting to just plug and go. But at least they may be reflecting on it after.
Sure.
Or before.
Cool. And how about the gradual release thing? Like, I'm not telling you should go do that this spring, but what's your sense? Like, how do they get out of Magic School or School AI and then be prepared to go use Gemini, assuming that their college isn't some kind of black box, which according to your policy review, many of them are. But
for now, yeah.
What's your sense, though?
I think senior year.
Yeah.
That way they understand and don't get too comfortable with the privacy guardrails.
Right.
Because even if you mess up in School AI or Magic School, their guardrails are keeping some of that data safe and protected.
Right.
Versus Gemini, ChatGPT, we don't know really where that data is going all the time.
Yep.
Or if it's being used. But those conversations are really important too. So even when they go to college, like, is this an accurate platform? Or why would the schools have their own? I know I have friends in the CPA world, and they have their own
closed
closed system to help train, to help keep that information private. So even going into the real world, they'll have to make sure, what's the purpose? What's the motivation? Is it protected? You don't want to just put your name, address, important information into ChatGPT.
Yep. Cool. Let's do 2 other quick things. The spaces insights. So in School AI, right, you've got a space, which is basically a roster, but we had to call it something different. So it's a space. And then you get these insights, which are basically analytics, but like the pulse and the exit ticket, we had to call it something different. All right. Sorry. I'm so annoying. How is that stuff? Are the spaces, did I just call them the correct thing? Are they spaces insights?
I think so. Yes. Yeah.
Right.
No,
are they helpful? Like, what do you got? What do you got in there as a teacher? What are they doing for you?
Well, I do like the Pulse ticket you can put the standards that you want them to hit, which is useful. Their AI spaces will kind of summarize what the kids are doing on the side. You can click in and see their whole conversation. And I know at even the middle school level, it is great when they flag concerning conversations.
Yeah. What does that look like?
So they will say maybe, emotional warning or sexually explicit conversation going on. This is an extreme. This is not my experience right now with seniors because they know I'm watching.
Yeah, right.
But it is a nice warning for teachers. We wouldn't know that in the other platforms, like ChatGPT and Claude, that you can go in and say, even with when I was talking about Caesar or metamorphosis, some of those conversations have those trigger words.
Yeah.
There is murder. So those conversations are going to come up and it will flag it. But then you can go back and see, oh, that was text related. But if a student veers off and starts sharing important information that obviously they wanted someone to know.
Or ideating.
Yeah,
right,
it would be a flag that comes up instantly.
Okay.
So that you can either go to that student and see what's going on, call a counselor. So those guardrails, I think, are important right now at like this stage.
Okay, cool. And then the other thing I wanted to ask about, School AI had a piece maybe 5 months ago, where the Anne Frank bot, or space rather, started saying stuff that was historically inaccurate, like, the Nazis weren't culpable for a war, whatever the case may be. But they had to do more fine tuning with the guardrails. Have you seen anything weird? Like, I know the kids are trying to catch hallucinations, which is awesome. But have you seen anything where you're like, whoa, that's wrong? Or, because again, this is a probabilistic technology, so it's not deterministic.
I actually brought up that case with some of my classes as well, trying to figure out, like, how did this happen? Huh. And we had a conversation about, was it trying to use protective language because of the age it was built for?
Yeah.
So
you could see its conflict somehow in the
system. It doesn't want to mention all these horrible things, and it just overcorrected.
Yep.
And what we can do and how we could use it in school. So the whole double checking and researching, kind of having it light that insight of, this is wrong, I need to find out what the real answer is.
Yep.
Could be beneficial. So you could turn it around into a teaching moment.
It sounds like you did.
Instead of letting it continue. And I think, according to the article, the teacher kind of helped backtrack, and they went and double checked and fact checked things. So as an English teacher, talking about motivation, bias, and just how tech works and communicates can be more valuable than actually using the character bot.
So your message to School AI is keep on being biased and hallucinating because it's teaching gold for me.
Well, no, but
No, but I think it's great. It's very, very cool. All right, but you haven't seen anything like particularly weird on your end.
Oddly, I haven't done a lot of character bots.
Okay.
Yet.
Yeah.
Simply because that had come out, and then
I'm gonna stay away from
a little bit before it was. I think it was a character. I'm not sure. They did Catcher in the Rye.
Yeah.
And that went with Holden Caulfield, went off the rails, and kids went to the teacher. I'm like, this is not saying appropriate things. So I've been steering away from characters right now.
Okay. Yeah, smart.
Yeah.
All right, we've talked about a lot of stuff. You've been so generous with your time. Is there anything like I didn't ask you that you just think, you are on the leading edge of this thing? It is interesting that we just covered the Carnegie Learning Study, and the number of folks that are starting to move towards student-facing AI is growing considerably. So is there anything, just word of advice or caution or inspiration to your colleagues out there? I know it's kind of a heavy question in the last 35 seconds.
Don't be afraid to play around with the tech, and it doesn't always have to take away that face-to-face. Even if you use it for your purposes, your design purposes, you can bring that collaboration and the face-to-face humanity into teaching. It doesn't have to erase it to all tech.
Beautiful. Love it. And you model that in your own life, and I'm sure you probably share that with the kids. In fact, because I'm a procrastinator, I did not have my act together for this Monday, so I sent you an email over the weekend saying, I know that you're really good about your homeschool or work life or on-screen, off-screen boundaries, so don't look at this. I apologize, but here's one of the things that we'll cover, blah, blah, blah. So you were very generous this morning to email me and go, I got it, Matt. It's all good.
I may have plugged in that article into 11 Reader and listened to it while walking the dog, so it works.
You and me both, minus the dog. I love 11 Reader. It's the best. All right. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. We're not quite done yet, but it's awesome. This will wrap up our beneath the surface conversation. Liz is going to be so jealous she wasn't here.
I'm sad I missed her.
I know. And we've got another buddy of ours, and that was his question as well. He's like, is Liz going to be there? I was like, no, sorry. I know I'm disappointing, but... All right, Joanne, listen, now it's time real quickly for our Bright Bite. So each week we've been trying to find a way in which AI is making some meaningful contribution to society, culture, the environment. the economy? Because I don't know, there's a little bit of down stuff going on these days. And honestly, also a lot of the conversation around AI is very complicated, especially generative AI. So these tend to be more things where AI is using kind of deep analytical systems and AI imagery. And here's a great example. So this is from the Associated Press. I saw this in a couple different locations, which is what the AP does. AI satellites help aid workers respond to the Myanmar earthquake damage. So after the 7.7 tragic earthquake that struck Myanmar, Microsoft's AI Good Lab partnered with Planet Labs to assess damage using satellite imagery customized by AI, right? So they had this, there was cloud cover that initially delayed the image capture, but once clear, the AI models identified 515 buildings with severe 80 to 100% damage, and then over 1,500 with moderate damage. So because the off-the-shelf kind of AI wasn't effective for this purpose, Microsoft built a city-specific model in just days to improve accuracy. And this data was then shared with aid groups like the Red Cross, helping responders prioritize those most in need. So another really great example of AI and vision and satellite data and big data systems really in real time making a positive contribution. So I don't know if you've kind of track these kinds of stories or have any particular reflections on the wacky world of AI doing good stuff, not just making weird and frank bots.
I sort of think the story reflects on how it can make humanity better.
Yeah.
And more, it got those people, that first responders that needed to be there in a faster, quicker way than if they were just guessing. And it's kind of speeding up that process. So it kind of does that balance of AI and then humans in charge.
Right. It's back to that kind of human in the foreground. Yeah, and that's the point of these stories, right? We, ages ago, Liz and I did an episode called AI for Good, the literacy component we might be missing, because I think so much of our anxiety in schools is around, the words and the images and hallucinations and bias.
The deep fakes and...
Right. But there's this whole other world of AI that kids who might be interested in career paths in this area. So anyhow, each and every week, there's just going to be a little bright bite.
Love it.
All right. So even though Liz is not here in person, she is channeling something very important. She's feeling the channel. So, my friend, with that, let's
roll the credits.
Nicely done.
As always, we'd love to hear what you think, so please let us know at ChatEDU@edadvance.org. That's EDADVANCE.org. And also rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you are using. ChatEDU is brought to you by EdAdvance, the nonprofit regional education service center in Litchfield, Connecticut. This episode of ChatEDU is sponsored by the National Center for Next Generation Manufacturing. ChatEDU is recorded, edited, and produced by Andre Angelo and Justin Pasco, whose dedication and expertise bring our discussions to life. ChatEDU's executive producer is the multi-talented rock star Cameron Audia. Additionally, we are grateful for the support of our colleague Gary Robinson, and we appreciate his time and talents. And of course, a big ChatEDU shout out to our fearless leader and executive director, Jonathan Costa, for inspiring the pod. And finally, a heartfelt thank you to our listeners for joining us on this journey exploring the thoughtful and innovative integration of AI in education.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Costa, and I am the executive director at EdAdvance, and I want you to know how much we appreciate our listeners. If you enjoyed the podcast, feel free to explore EdAdvance's other AI services, which include customized professional learning of all kinds, conferences, and our micro-credential co-sponsored by the Southern Connecticut State University Office of Workforce and Lifelong Learning. Just visit skills21.org/AI to learn more. That's all for now, and thank you again for listening to ChatEDU.